I'm sorry that I will continue to make concentration hard after lunch, and I will do so even more because I will speak in English. It's a project for me for the future to hopefully be able to speak and give a presentation in Arabic here in one of the future conferences. Towards the end of the presentation of Dr. Jarrah, he has already started to talk about the international community, and this is what I will be going to talk about in my presentation. A lot, of course, as we're coming to the end of this conference, has been said about Area C here, about the difficult circumstances of the local communities, about the policies of displacement and dispossession, and about the courageous Palestinian attempts of resistance and perseverance and steadfastness. And some things have also been mentioned today and yesterday about the role of the international community. Somebody said, for example, that the pure monitoring by the international community of what is going on in Area C is not enough, and Palestinians need to find their own ways of response and protection and develop a real strategy of their own. This came up once in many lectures. However, given the asymmetry of this conflict, I think it is safe to assume that Palestinians will need allies for their goal and to end the occupation. But they need to decide which allies and which kind of support they want, considering that the international involvement in the Oslo process has not brought success, and all the institution building and large amount of aid that have been flowing, as has been pointed out before, did not lead to a Palestinian state and not to a decisive improvement of the overall economic and social environment. We have heard yesterday different analysis of Israeli motives, may they be of economic, security, or ideological nature, but Palestinians need to find their own political response. Recently, there has been a lot of attention and discussion, not only here, about the issue of Area C internationally. On a diplomatic level, among the NGOs, in the media, after a rather long period of silence, as if the problem we talk about here was new and not at least 17 years old. Some call this already the new Area C hype. Calling it a hype already includes a critical notion in assessing this new focus on Area C, because a hype might attract so much attention that other problems might be forgotten, like Gaza or East Jerusalem. A hype might also start fast and initiate many activities, but might not last for a long time and might not be sustainable. In the following, I want to address three main questions. First, how did the discourse on Area C develop over the last 20 years? Second, why is there such a big attention for this issue now, which could have been addressed much earlier? And what does the international community currently plan for Area C? And finally, what are the positive and what are the negative aspects of these current plans? Where are chances and where are risks? And is it enough to move the political situation forward? So first, let me look briefly at some of the attitudes in the international community towards this issue, Area C. Some early critics of the Oslo process, like Edward Said, have defined the underlying structure of the transitional approach of Oslo from the beginning as a losing strategy for Palestinians. The fragmentization of areas ABC in this reading was defined as a matrix of control, designed from the beginning not to allow a quick transfer of territories, but ongoing Israeli control over land. Edward Said wrote as early as 1993, just right after the Oslo Accords, and I quote, "So first of all, let us call the agreement by its real name, an instrument of Palestinian surrender, a Palestinian Versailles. What makes it worse is that for at least the past 15 years, the PLO could have negotiated a better arrangement than this modified Allon plan." And yesterday we have talked in some of the presentations about the Allon plan and about what this means. When 2 years later, the 1995 interim agreement on the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, called Oslo II, was signed on September 28th in Taba, the international community was of course part of the creation of Area C, when besides President Clinton, representatives of Russia, Norway and the EU witnessed the agreement, and the international community endorsed it, and in this way added to its international recognition and legitimacy. An agreement which was supposed to put into place a 5-year interim period for the transfer of territories and a final status agreement. In 1998, as has been mentioned before, the planning and zoning in Area C was supposed to be transferred to the Palestinian Authority as the interim agreement stipulated in Article 27. And I quote, "In Area C, powers and responsibilities related to the sphere of planning and zoning will be transferred gradually to Palestinian jurisdiction that will cover West Bank and Gaza Strip territory, except for the issues that will be negotiated in the permanent status negotiations during the further redeployment phases, to be completed within 18 months from the date of the inauguration of the Council." And the Palestinian Legislative Council was established in March 1996. And as we all know and have been discussing, this transfer of power in autumn 98 was never even started, and subsequent agreements like the 1998 Wye River Memorandum were also never implemented. In this phase, the US had made it clear in letters to the Israeli government, to then Prime Minister Netanyahu, that Israel's security needs would be given highest priority in the policy approach, which in fact gave a green light for Israel to stop the redeployment according to the commitments, always quoting security concerns. With the breakdown of negotiations in 2000 and the beginning of the Second Intifada, the majority of the West Bank was still, of course, classified as Area C, leaving the full authority, including planning and zoning, and the full military and civil control to Israel. 5 years had been lost, and no progress in changing the structure and transferring any authority had been made. A further step in dividing and de-developing Area C was the decision to build the separation barrier, de facto annexing approximately 10% of the West Bank of Area C and making there any delivery of services and development impossible. Instead of allowing more gradual control by the PA in Area C and making this a priority in its policy, it seems as if the international community accepted quietly that the ABC structure created in 1995 was there to permanently stay. While the construction of the wall added more fuel to this problem, the declared commitment to establish a Palestinian state was upheld. But most of the development aid and state-building attempts that were now carried out in Area A and B, which did not prevent the marginalization and fragmentization of Area C. On the contrary, this even increased the problem by encouraging islands of limited economic success and intentionally or unintentionally assuming a future Palestinian state could be built on 40% of the West Bank, excluding the land of Area C, which encompasses, as has been noted by many speakers here, all the resources that are necessary for a Palestinian state. In 2009, Prime Minister Fayyad started his state-building initiative, ending the occupation, establishing the state. While the plan mentions the problem Area C, and I think Prime Minister Fayyad is correctly given some credit for bringing the issue to the table, there is no specification of a strategy for Area C and how to overcome the central problem, the Israeli control in all aspects of life. It says, however, and I quote from Fayyad's plan, Israel seizes control of water resources and land in Area C, which consists of vast, uninhabited areas located outside the major population centers. These areas are natural locations for large infrastructure projects, such as wastewater treatment plants, landfills, water pipelines, and main roads. However, Israel has prevented the PNA from developing many essential projects. Consequently, several donor-funded projects are indefinitely suspended. The government will work with the international community to apply pressure on Israel to bring an end to these obstructive practices. However, the plan, together with the Palestinian National Development Plan 2011 till 2013, while including these big infrastructure projects, fell short of any real strategy for the PA to improve the overall situation in Area C. All bigger bilateral development projects by the US, EU and other donors had confronted major problems in Area C. Among them, for example, the Future for Palestine initiative started in January 2008 by the German Foreign Ministry to assist the communities of particularly neglected areas, primarily in Area C. In 2010, the first concrete projects were established. They were helpful, but negotiated on an individual basis and totally depending on the goodwill of Israeli bureaucracy of the ICA and COGAT. And if you look into some of these projects, clinics, wastewater plants, it took years and years to get the permissions and to get something done on the ground. Although NGOs and individual donor countries had been working in Area C in different capacities between 1995 and 2011, no strategy whatsoever has been developed to address the structural problem. Over time, it seems the ABC structure was somehow taken for granted with grave consequences, which have been described by numerous speakers here and do not repeat, leaving only some 50,000 inhabitants in a minor part inside of Area C, surrounded by settlements and closed military zones. As Jad Ishaq and others have pointed out, separating Area C from the West Bank is artificial, because it comes to resources, infrastructure, water, land, mobility. Without Area C, there is no Palestinian state. All areas in the West Bank are affected by the restrictions, and yet Palestinian governments and international donors widely ignored this fact. Until 2012, the approach to Area C was mainly of a humanitarian but not strategic nature. It was asked how to improve the living conditions of the population in Area C and how to protect them better from displacement and violence. UN OCHA, for example, developed an emergency response mechanism for that matter and has monitored the situation on the ground, as has many Palestinian, Israeli and international human rights organizations. But as was pointed out yesterday by someone during the discussion, monitoring is not enough. Let me now talk about the current situation and what is done currently by the international community. In the last years, as I have said, the attention for Area C has steadily risen. Media reports have increased on the growing dispossession of Area C communities, the growing number and growing aggression of Israeli settlers, and of the need for the international community to intervene. Since several months now, there is a specific rise in attention for Area C among the diplomatic community, civil society, academia, and the media. What is the reason for this? Partly, for sure, as Robert Sari has pointed out here yesterday, the total lack of any political horizon in the last years, especially since the Obama government effectively retreated from any meaningful attempts to revive negotiations. So with Area C, there is something that can be tackled very concretely. And those activities are defined as a precondition for, as diplomats representing the EU or the Quartet do not get tired to say, saving the two-state solution. Two major reports by the EU in 2011 also made this point and underlined the need for action, which got a lot of attention in the media. First, the Head of Mission report on East Jerusalem in February 2012, describing the closing window of opportunities to find a just solution for Jerusalem, while daily new facts on the ground are created. And secondly, the Head of Mission report on Area C and Palestinian state building from January 2012. I don't know how I'm with the timing. Okay, so I speed up a little bit. The report, especially on Area C, had made an important impact on the member states to review their Area C policies. Probably the report also provoked a destructive response from Israel with several demolition orders directly targeting projects funded by EU member states, among them Germany. This, however, added to a spiral of NGO campaigns and mounting public pressure and press reports on these actions. While the policies of demolition by the Israeli army are ongoing for years, and currently about 3,300 demolition orders are pending, these new demolition orders after the report against international projects were reported on so prominently that Israel made an internal decision to refrain from carrying out these demolitions. In Germany, the case of a number of solar and wind installations in the South Hebron Hills made national headlines. Several international delegations visited the site, and the German government, which had supported projects with 600,000 euros, protested against the demolition order, and numerous delegations went to visit these projects. Members of the German Green Party represented in the parliament visited the installations, for example, in March 2012, and brought forward a motion in June 2012 discussing the issue in the German parliament. In general, for the bilateral projects which EU states carry out on their own, states like Germany currently push Israel in negotiations to do three things. First, to approve projects faster and in a more transparent way. Secondly, to change the permit regime for large-scale infrastructure projects, which currently take years to achieve permission and realization. And third, they ask Israel to stop demolitions until a new system of planning and zoning is in place. Now in 2012, finally, a paradigm shift seems to have occurred with new approaches and ideas how to tackle Area C in the international arena, as has been recommended in the EU report. The EU has now taken the lead together with the PA in a push for development in Area C. The most important elements of a new strategy are again three elements. First, to assist Palestinians in the planning of master plans for communities and to speed up decision making to enable more and quicker construction and delivery of services to the Palestinian communities. Secondly, to push Israel to act in a fairer and more transparent manner and to improve negotiation of compromises between Israel and Palestine. The biggest problem so far due to the EU was not reaching agreements as such, but the execution of existing decisions, since the Israeli bureaucracy does not allow Palestinians any interference in these procedures. Now the EU intends that once an agreement is made and a master plan is approved within 6 months, the construction should start no matter the response of the ICA or other Israeli bodies. And this is a very, very important point. Thirdly, the development of a monitoring and response mechanism for these plans, including options for EU reaction if this process will not work as envisioned, for example, through the media or public pressure and advocacy strategy that was talked about. In total, 80 to 100 concrete master plans in Area C due to the EU are supposed to be designed in the next months and years, 60 among them in the Jordan Valley. Currently, 24 plans are on the table and 5 are already recognized by Israel. So carrying them out should start now. 6 months from now, there should be concrete construction. It is important to note that so far all of these policies are intended to be carried out in consensus, not in confrontation with Israel. This is the declared goal of the European Union. As was formulated in the Council conclusions of May 14, 2012, I quote, "The European Union will engage with the government of Israel to work out improved mechanisms for the implementation of the donor-funded projects for the benefit of the Palestinian population in Area C. The EU has established a special interest group for its member states to discuss this issue. The Commission has currently reserved 7 million euros for such development projects in Area C and 1 million reserved for the support of master plans. There is currently no lack of initiative, but there is also clearly no change yet in Israeli policies towards Area C. Therefore, it remains to be seen how the Israeli government will respond to all these new EU policies. And I think this is crucial if we sit in this conference, which is called Confronting Israeli Policies of Colonialization, while the EU approach is to work with Israel here, and it is yet very unclear how successful this will be. However, there is currently a policy shift in the EU, and for the first time in 2012, the Palestinians are supported in developing long-term and comprehensive development plans with concrete, practical implications to go ahead with development on the ground. Okay, I speed up and come to the conclusion. If I look at the positive side of this new approach by the EU, it will hopefully do a lot of good things for the marginalized people in Area C, expand their services, stop the transfer of populations, and support their independence in planning and development in a more protected environment. With Area C so high on the international agenda, it will be much more difficult for Israel to continue the policy of de-development, demolitions, and continuous harassment. Supporting Palestinian communities to do their own planning, to expand building and development, to create fact on the grounds, will not change the current asymmetry, but might be able to slow down the facts currently created on the ground by increasing settler populations and dispossession of Palestinian land. It is a positive step in the international community's approach because the focus is laid on empowering Palestinian capacities and initiative. However, the political capital now invested in Area C cannot replace the urgent need to revisit diplomatic alternatives, or cannot be even seen as a blueprint for advancing the solution of the conflict. Also, Area C is by far not the only problem currently making the two-state solution impossible. While it might be true that without addressing Area C, the two-state solution is lost, this does not mean that addressing Area C will make the two-state solution any more probable. And there are, of course, other crucial problems, as I've said, as East Jerusalem and Gaza. Another big problem is that all development in Area C that will take place now, that we talk about, will take place in a very limited geographical space, since 70% of Area C are designated as closed military zones or allocated to the settlements. A scenario where Palestinian planning, even with international support, will be able to reclaim territory which is already lost is very hard to imagine. Even if the negotiations should be more fair or quicker or more transparent, Israeli authorities will aim to keep as much territory as possible due to the factors widely discussed in this conference. Talking about Area C as a prime goal of international efforts comes very, very late, almost 20 years after the signing of the Oslo Accords. Too much time has been lost. I asked myself, sitting in this conference, if there is not rather the time to ask the question of the legitimacy of the agreements and the area of ABC structure itself. This issue, of course, is a much bigger one to address, and with the question of the structure of the territory comes the question of the legitimacy of the Palestinian Authority. Finally, it is of utmost importance to remember that the occupation in the West Bank and the policies in Area C do not stand above international law. International humanitarian law and the Fourth Geneva Conventions, as Dr. Gerard has also mentioned, are still the framework of reference, and they are recognized by the international community. 17 years after the structure of Area C was created for a specific purpose, the transfer of land in combination with a solution to final status issues, and 17 years after the failure of these structures, the legality and legitimacy of the structures created with the 1995 Oslo II Accords should be revisited. In short, talking about Area C should not be limited to talking about master plans. It should legally and intellectually challenge the whole system which lies beneath.